Ladies and gentlemen, the day you are watching this video, that means that we have The Last of Us Part 2 tonight. I cannot wait. It's been 7 years since the original game. I've been so hyped for it. I host a podcast about it for over a year now. I cannot wait for The Last of Us Part 2. But before we get there, make sure to also be aware that we are doing the Last of Us Part 2 stream series that will be starting tonight. As soon as the game comes available digitally, I will be, live streaming here on the channel. We're going to probably start maybe 20-30 minutes before the stream starts just to get people in and stuff like that and get people hyped. And then we will, of course, be streaming as long as we can. And for the next few days, you'll be seeing a lot of Last of Us Part 2 streams, of course. But before we end off there and before we start there, we do have to talk about some things that I've been thinking about that I want to be addressed in the sequel to The Last of Us. So what's going on, guys? It is your boy TKD10 back in PlayStation Source, and we're going to talk about things that I want to be addressed or referenced in The Last of Us Part 2. Now, of course, most importantly, before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video as well as stay subscribed to PlayStation Source to keep up with the latest and greatest and all things Last of Us Part 2 and the PlayStation and PS5 as a whole, as we lead on to tonight, where we will be streaming once again Last of Us Part 2 once it becomes available. Now, there are a few things here that, I'm okay with not seeing, and really, to be honest, I'm really okay with not seeing any of these because I do understand that, when something gets explained too much, it might lessen its overall impact. I do understand that, and I know a lot of people are gonna be probably replying in the comments like, oh no, like this was perfect the way they left this off and I don't want this reference again, do understand that, but I still do think that there are some threads that Naughty Dog can pull from these aspects and these loose ends from The Last of Us and make it really, really cool in the sequel to The Last of Us with The Last of Us Part 2. But starting off here, let's talk about good old Joel and his past. Not talking like childhood, because we do know that he was raised in Texas with Tommy, of course, but we're talking about a little bit before the pandemic, before meeting Ellie, and all that was in between in terms of the 20 years that went on that he was living without meeting Ellie, and just that wasn't pictured in the first game, essentially where we get that whole jump to 20 years later in the original Last of Us, right? So according to Wiki, the Last of Us fandom Wiki, we do know that he was a, quote, black market smuggler dealing in contraband and took dehumanizing jobs, according to that Wiki as well. Again, link below in the description. And he also had a very short marriage to Sarah's mother, but that was never really elaborated on because he, I believe, alluded in The Last of Us to it being a very, very touchy subject and just something that he just didn't want to talk about, understandably so. But I want to know how dark that actually is. Maybe there's more implications as to why he doesn't talk about his ex-wife, or whether it be divorce or widowed or whatever it was. It was definitely something that he doesn't want to discuss anytime soon. But what I really want to focus on in The Last of Us Part 2 is about those years of dehumanizing jobs with Tommy. Tommy does allude to this in Tommy's Damn segment in The Last of Us 1, and even Joel alludes to it when Ellie asks if he's ever killed anyone that was innocent, and he just refuses to answer the question. But I would love to hear more about exactly what happened over those years that drew Tommy to leave Joel, because there was a very, very deep falling out, and I have a younger brother, to be fair, and I know that it would take a lot for me to disown my little brother, you know what I'm saying? So I definitely do want to know what Joel did to somehow have this very, very deep canyon between him and Tommy that just drove them to not speak for however long it was, but it was definitely a considerable amount of time. And considering that in the end of The Last of Us we do go back to Tommy's Dam at Jackson, and we do spend a lot of the time in The Last of Us Part 2 in Jackson, I'm sure we will get some sort of allusion or payoff to this whole thing, hopefully another cutscene giving us a rundown on the dark past that Joel had. Next up here, the trauma of Sam and Henry that Joel and Ellie experience. How did it exactly affect Ellie and Joel? We see Ellie is still carrying Sam's toy in the Left Behind DLC, and Joel just refuses to talk about it straight up, leading into Tommy's Dam in The Last of Us 1. But I have to assume there's more to this than what meets the eye than what was presented to us in The Last of Us 1. Does Joel feel like he's potentially responsible for Sam getting bit? bit due to him not being 100% accurate during the sniper post level, during the suburbs where you're holed up and then you first have the wave of enemies coming at you and then the infected coming at you, and then that's where Sam gets bit. Is there some sort of remorse that Joel has because he wasn't as precise with his shots during that whole segment? Does he carry that with him? Does Ellie still carry Sam's robot in her backpack, or maybe does she have it in her room? I hope to see it brought up in some sort of capacity in The Last of Us Part 2. This one is definitely pertinent to me just because I just played Left Behind DLC, absolutely loved it on stream. If you guys haven't checked it out, I'll put a card over here on top of the video. It is a very, very great DLC. I loved it so much. The trauma of Riley and how Ellie is affected. Ellie's real first person that taught her a deeper meaning of love is definitely Riley, and this was heavily explored in Road to Part 2 number 39, where I basically explain that when you look at Ellie's life, right, she has, as you know, conceivably there hasn't been a father figure that has been introduced in Ellie's life besides Joel, right? And then we also have Ellie's mother, Anna, who died giving birth to her about a day after she was born, right? So really Ellie was definitely missing that familial love that you get at a younger age in her early years of development until she meets Riley, where she actually for the first time, I think personally, feels something greater than just like a friendship or something like a camaraderie. Like it definitely went beyond that with her and Riley, and it definitely went deeper into more of a love type of feeling that I don't think Ellie's ever experienced prior to that, you know, as far as we're aware, right? So how does this reflect when we see older Ellie with a more romantic relationship like with Dina? Does Ellie still think about Riley? Does Ellie vent to Dina about Riley and open up about losing her first, you know, love essentially via losing Riley? I think it could be a really interesting thread to see, and seeing how Ellie is potentially reminded of Riley's death every time she looks at her bite mark on her forearm, we could see how the trauma of it follows her every day. Next up here, this one we kind of already have an answer for, but I do want to see a little bit more deeper on this whole thing, and we likely will, so this one's kind of just a throwaway one to a degree, but I just figured I'd just throw it in here. The infected. The different types of infected are achieved by how long a person is infected, but what does an infection look like after 25 years? Of course, within the 20-year span, we have seen, of course, the clicker, the stalker, the bloater, etc. Like, we have seen those before, but what does it look like when you add another 5 years to infected that haven't been touched in 25 years, or the fact that maybe there are some that are in like different regions? Like, does weather have something to do with how the infection spreads and changes certain beings? That's what I want to see with The Last of Us Part 2. We've seen a new infected enemy type already called the Shambler, of course, as described by The Last of Us Wiki, quote, looks similar to bloaters and share many of their traits, such as immense strength and durability. Shamblers are horrifying, walking postal clusters that spray gaseous acid when they get near the player and take massive damage before dying. Once defeated, these festering threats explode with violent force. So definitely these enemies look very, very daunting in terms of the little gameplay that we got of the Shamblers, but there was something that Neil Druckmann hinted at during the state of play of new types of infected during the stream. The main question is, what else could be infected by the cordyceps infection besides humans? We had an episode of Road to Part 2 a few months back discussing the potentiality of seeing animals infected, again carded up here on top of the screen, and based off of the sneak peek we were given at the state of play, I'm starting to buy it. But let me know what you guys think about this sound cue that we got from the state of play. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Is this an animal? Is this some crazy human that just has infection for decades or whatever? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Next up, this one surely has to be brought up, and I do not see how it just could not. I just don't see a future where this doesn't get addressed. The lie. Joel lied to Ellie straight up at the end of Last of Us Part 1, and while some disagree, I personally think it's pretty clear that Ellie knew he was lying. I want to see this addressed the most. Is this a sore subject for Joel and continues to keep the lie even after Ellie says she doesn't believe it? Does Ellie organically find out that he was lying? We hear Joel admitting what happened to a person in the beginning of State of Play, and judging by how he refers to Ellie in the third person, it's likely Tommy, but we'll have to see. But hear this clip for yourself. Who do you think Joel is talking to in this audio dialogue with him confessing the lie? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below.
I don't know what happened. I was supposed to take her to the Fireflies and walk away. They were actually going to make a cure. The only catch, it would kill her.
So these next two are a bit of honorable mentions because I can see them easily not being brought up, but I figure, why not throw them in here because I do think that we may have these addressed in The Last of Us Part 2. The Fireflies. We saw the Firefly logo in the initial Last of Us Part 2 reveal at PSX 2016, but as far as I can tell, that's the last we've heard or seen of them. I just find it hard to believe that the Fireflies are just gone from The Last of Us Part 2. They have to be out there, right? Maybe hunting Joel for what he did at St. Mary's Hospital at the end of the game in the first Last of Us. Maybe they're still hunting Ellie. Like who knows exactly where they're at, but I don't think that the Fireflies are just gone and just obliterated. I just have a hard time believing that. I do think that we will get something from them in The Last of Us Part 2. And lastly here, this one is very special to me. I love this aspect of the original Last of Us, even when I first played it, all the way until my latest playthrough on the channel. I love this aspect of Last of Us 1 and really hope we get something, but also at the same time I kind of hope we don't, but I will explain myself here when I just break it all down here. So the story of Ish. This one I kind of doubt we'll see, but it is a high-key favorite of mine because I loved reading Ish's notes in Last of Us 1. Of course, we did do a Road to Part 2 episode, again carded up here, dedicated to the entire story of Ish. I'm gonna give you guys a little truncated version of the story of Ish real quick here. So essentially, he was a sailor out at sea. He wanted to get away from the affection. He came back, saw everything was horrible. He was, I believe, held up in the suburbs for a little bit, and then he ran across some members that were in the underground portion of the sewers and everything. So these members invite Ish to become a part of their group, and this group has women, children, men. It's a whole long community. Think of the Jackson settlement, but a lot smaller in the sewers, right? So they were all there, and then there are a bunch of little kids there, and they look up to Ish as a protector and everything. And then due to circumstances that I will not spoil here on the video, make sure to go check out Road to Part 2, that episode, they end up having a tragic end to the sewer settlement, and then Ish survives, fortunately, and then a few others survived as well, but they essentially left off the story there in Last of Us 1. So I would love to see us somehow pick up the story or somehow just allude to it in The Last of Us Part 2, because it was pretty open-ended and it could go pretty much either way. I can see the backlash of this inclusion and keeping it up to the player's interpretation on where Ish's story goes. I do understand that, and I could definitely see criticism of it being like a small world type of dilemma of having it in The Last of Us Part 2, what are the odds really, but I would still love to see it somehow mentioned in Last of Us Part 2 because I love Ish's story. He just seemed like a really cool guy in the notes that were in Last of Us 1, and would love to see it somehow represented in The Last of Us Part 2. So those have been my thoughts, but most importantly, let me know what you can see in the comments below. What do you want to have addressed before The Last of Us Part 2 tonight? Oh man, I cannot wait for this game, guys. Make sure to keep it locked here on the channel. Stay subscribed, push that notification bell, follow all the links down below in the description to our Discord, our Twitter, as also Anchor link to listen to long form content and podcast format. That of course being Road to Part 2, as well as the newly started Road to Ghost of Tsushima. Like the video if you enjoyed it, as well as stay subscribed to PlayStation Source to keep up with the latest and greatest in PlayStation, Last of Us Part 2, PS5, and all things involving those topics. Man, guys, tonight the Last of Us Part 2 stream series does start. I want to see everyone there. Let's get hype. Let's get it going. We will be streaming this game for the foreseeable future until it is a wrap on the stream series. You will see my full first playthrough streamed on the channel. It's gonna be some weird hours, but just keep up with it. It's gonna be a great time. I can't wait for it, and let's get hype. Let's get hype, guys. I can't believe I'm sitting here. Last of Us Part 2 is on my PS4 Pro downloaded. I am so excited, guys. Thank you all for watching, and as always, greatness awaits.